Today we're going to be sharing lessons learned from a marriage that didn't go well and lessons learned from a marriage that's going great.
Welcome to Mike for Men with your host, Mike Huey. Mike shares real talks for real men who want to make a real impact. Mike has been in a good and bad marriage. In today's episode, Mike shares what he learned so you can profit from his experiences. And now, your host, Mike Huey.
So just a little bit of context. One of the things I notice is that a lot of people will go to people who have succeeded and accomplished great things and learn from them. And that's awesome. That's great. We got to do that. However, sometimes there's just as good of lessons learned from people who tried something, failed, and learned from their failure so we don't have to repeat those same issues. And so I thought, I've had a marriage that lasted 10 years that did not end well. And I've been in a marriage for over 20 years that's going awesome. So I thought one of the best things I could do is share what are the lessons I learned so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I made in my first marriage. You don't have to make the same mistakes I've made in my second marriage. And you can kind of reap some of the benefits or rewards that I've learned after being married as long as I have. So the first things I want to talk about are 5 mistakes that I made really in my first marriage. 5 things that I didn't do well. Now, just to give some context, dated my high school sweetheart for on and off 4 years. And then we got married when I was way too early. I know this. When I was 21, 22, I thought I was fully mature and everything, and I knew what I was doing. And got married at 20. I think it was like right before my 22nd birthday. So I thought since I had dated this young lady for so many years that I knew her, she knew me, and we were going to have a great marriage. So here's the 5 mistakes I made in that first marriage that I hope you don't make either when you get married or if you are married, make some course corrections. The first thing is that as an immature young man in my early 20s, man, I really thought it was all about me. It was about my college degree. It was about me going off in the military. And my first wife was really patient. She was really helpful. I remember I was at the one of the military academies, and believe it or not, I was stressed. I needed some running shoes. She drove all the way from home, all the way to the academy to sneak some shoes out in the middle of the night so that I had running shoes in the morning so that I wouldn't, it was like she did all kinds of things to help me. And I'm not quite sure I did all kinds of things to help her. I thought it was all about me. I took her for granted. So that's probably the first thing that I want to encourage you to do. I took her for granted. I took her for granted in my career. I took her for granted in our sex life. Again, ego, immaturity, things like that really, really damaged, I think, our relationship. So that was the first mistake. The second is that I listened to her words rather than what she was really trying to communicate. Now, later we're going to be talking about how to listen. Listening skills have dramatically changed the ability to communicate and understand and reduce stress and reduce arguments, things like that, because I've noticed a lot of times we listen to what people have said versus what they're really trying to communicate. And I'll have another episode really going into a deep dive into listening skills. But I listened to her words. And so if she said, "Mike, you're never home," I heard her saying, "You're never home." And I was like, but I'm always home. I'm here, 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 here. But I didn't hear what she was trying to communicate. And that was she was lonely. She needed somebody to be there with her. And that's what she was trying to communicate. So the second mistake I made in my first marriage was I listened to her words and not really what she was trying to communicate. The third thing that I messed up with is I let others push me out of a weekly date time with my wife. Now, to give you context, I thought I was doing well because we had an agreed to time that we would either have date time, whether if we couldn't afford it, there was times we couldn't even afford a McDonald's sandwich, but we at least shut things down at our house and said, hey, it's just time for the two of us. I was in a position as a youth pastor, believe it or not, and people in the church were like, he can't do this. We need him all these times. And I let people in the politics push me out of that weekly time alone with my wife, and she needed that. And so that was another mistake. Don't let other people push you, whether it's guys wanting you to play poker or go ice fishing or go hunting, and or people at work saying, no, we need you to work longer hours, more hours, and you start finding that other people are pushing you out of the relationship that you need. And I want to encourage you, have that weekly date time. So that was a fourth mistake I made. And then the fifth one, and it's a reason that a lot of people really struggle in marriages, is finances. My first wife and I, we really didn't have strong systems of managing our finances. And so it was always, our entire marriage was a financial struggle. And so when you compound financial struggles, husband's, it's about him. Husband's not really hearing what she's feeling or what she's going through. It's no wonder why a marriage like that is not going to work. So those were the 5 things I learned from my first marriage. And now to share some of the things I've learned that I've applied, and I think it's one of the major reasons, the 5 reasons that I have such a dynamic, fun, enjoyable relationship, which is what I wanted in the first place. So to give you some context, these 5 are not necessarily the inverse of what I just shared. They're closely related, but they're different. So hang in there and listen. But a lot of people that meet us would say, man, these people have been married over 20 years. They're passionate. They're always holding hands or being snuggly. They do things together. They're having so much fun. What is Mike doing has such a fun, dynamic relationship? So I wanted to share some of these 5 things that I would attribute the reasons we're having a great relationship. The first is, a lot of people think that being faithful to your wife is just not sleeping around with other people. And I think being faithful to your wife is a lot more than that. She said yes to you because you promised to love and cherish her. You promised to be this provider. You promised a lot of stuff. And being faithful means being faithful to that promise. So I'm tossing out that being faithful means finding what she needs and helping provide that. So I look for opportunities and resources to help her excel in her dreams and her goals. It's not just about me, but I'm looking, if I know that she's going to start a new career or she's looking at a job raise, when I come across in my business world a book or a resource or another person that's accomplished something, and I said, hey, Susan, you need to maybe, here's a book to read, or here's a conference to go to, or here's somebody, a coffee thing that I think really may help you. I try to keep looking for opportunities to help her and give her resources so that she excels in her career. Which leads to number 2. Somebody once said, one of the best ways to have a great marriage is to try to outserve each other. And I love that. I mean, there was a guy I was kind of mentoring a little bit, and he'd meet me on my front porch about every other week on a Saturday, and he was telling me, Mike, I'm having so much problems in my marriage, and we're kind of giving up, and we're gonna stay together because she's now pregnant with our first child, but I think we're gonna shift into being like maybe just roommates. And I was like, well, how old are you? And he was like, yeah, I'm 35. I was like, dude, you got this whole life together with you, and you're already giving up at 35. And so when we started talking, I started saying, what is it? How is it you treat her? What's going on? And when I said one thing to him, I said, look for ways to outserve her. Don't tell her you're trying to do this. Just do it. Let her see by example. I saw them 2 months later. They're walking in front of our house. They come up on the porch, talk to me, and she's bubbling. Now here's a side note, a sidebar to this whole thing. I can usually tell how good a marriage is by the brightness in the wife's eyes. If they're bright, I know that they've got a great marriage. She's being nurtured. If they're dull, I know that she's being pushed down or there's issues there, because anyway, that's a side note. But she came in, she had this brightness on her face, and I was like, wow, and this is really different. What happened? And she goes, I don't know what you've told my husband, but we're like having a second honeymoon. And I'm finding out he's doing things like giving her foot rubs at night and doing different things to just add in. I look at my parents' marriage, and I don't think I ever saw my dad do the dishes. I don't think I ever saw him do other things. Now, he did other things, and we'll talk about that later. He's not an all bad guy. I was just saying, I notice in some marriages, especially the previous generation, it's probably true in other families now that I think about it, who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. The guys weren't always serving the wife. It was all about them. So I want to encourage you. It takes humility to serve, but try to serve each other. Look for ways that really help her. The third area that I've learned and have applied is I try to listen to her. And again, we're going to be talking about another session, but I do try to listen to what she's actually trying to say versus what her words are and what is she really trying to communicate. That it really shifts. So I don't want to spend more time because that will be another episode, but watch for that. The fourth area that I've learned in a good marriage is we really work together. We work together financially. We work together on our spirituality. We work together physically. We take a walk probably maybe every other night at the least together. We have family goals together. So we sit down on a monthly basis and make sure we look at our budget for the upcoming week. I give her our balance sheet updates when I do that every quarter. We know where each other's finances are. We pray for each other. We go to the same church. We have devotional times together. We pray for each other. We communicate. We exercise. She watches my diet more than I probably should, but we do things together. So that's the fourth area that I want to encourage you to look at in a strong marriage. And then the fifth one, and kind of the aha for me, was always love her even when you don't like her. Now, I know some people are like, no, we'll always like. I'm telling you, if you've never been married or you're newly married, there's going to be times you don't like each other. You're not going to like how she did this or how she did that, or her griping or complaining, or her this or her that. Whatever it is, there's going to be areas you just don't like each other. And you're like, I think I want to just give this up. Always love, even when you don't like each other. And love is really that commitment. And love is that I'm going to do what's in her best interest, not my best interest. So those are the 5 things I've learned from a good marriage, 5 things I learned from a marriage that didn't end well. I hope you can take those and apply them to your life. If you're not married, come back to this when you are, or take notes. If you are, take 1 or 2 things immediately out of this and apply it to your marriage. And I hope to hear from you how it changes. So if something does happen, go down in the bucket below in this YouTube or this podcast and let me know what's happened, what hasn't happened. If you've got some other great ideas about things that went wrong or went well, boy, I'd love to hear about that. Put that in the bucket. But again, until next time, the world needs you. The world needs your love, especially your wife, and your children and your world will need your legacy.
Thank you for listening to Mike for Men. If you enjoyed listening to this in a podcast, please subscribe and give us a review. If you are watching this video, please subscribe and click the bell below so you will know when the next episode comes out. If there is a topic you would like Mike or his guests to address, please write them in the comments section below. Again, thank you for listening.